everyone, and welcome back once again to Talkmaster English Channel. In this place, we learn English slowly, comfortably, naturally, and emotionally through real conversations, meaningful stories, and simple moments from daily life that can quietly change the way you think about learning English every single day.
Hi everyone, I'm Tom, and today's episode is going to feel very warm, very human, and hopefully very motivating for anyone who has ever felt tired, shy, frustrated, or emotionally exhausted while trying to improve their English little by little every day.
Yes, because today's topic is very special and very close to our hearts. And the title of today's long conversation podcast is Learn English Through Daily Motivation Stories.
And honestly, I really love this topic because sometimes people think learning English only means memorizing vocabulary, studying grammar books, or watching educational videos for many hours every day.
But real English learning is often connected to real emotions, real struggles, real conversations, and small life experiences that slowly help you become stronger, calmer, and more confident over time.
Exactly, because sometimes one simple conversation can motivate you more deeply than studying 50 difficult grammar rules alone late at night while feeling stressed and discouraged.
And maybe many listeners understand this emotional feeling very clearly, because there are days when learning English feels exciting and enjoyable. But there are also days when your confidence suddenly becomes weak and your motivation quietly disappears.
Yes, especially when you compare yourself to fluent speakers online and begin asking yourself painful questions like, why is my English still so simple? Or why do I still make beginner mistakes after studying for so long?
And slowly, those negative thoughts can become very heavy emotionally, especially when you are trying your best but still feel nervous every time you open your mouth to speak English in front of other people.
But today, we want to remind everyone listening that progress is not always loud, fast, or dramatic, because sometimes growth happens very quietly inside your mind and heart without you even realizing it immediately.
Yes, and that is why today's episode will be filled with emotional stories, funny mistakes, daily life experiences, motivational moments, and realistic conversations that many beginners can deeply connect with naturally.
We hope these stories help you feel less alone during your English journey and help you understand that every learner experiences fear, confusion, embarrassment, and self-doubt sometimes.
Even confident English speakers once struggled to say simple sentences correctly while feeling nervous and uncomfortable inside.
That is very true, and honestly, one of the biggest problems for many learners is not vocabulary or grammar itself, but fear of mistakes and fear of judgment from other people.
Because when fear controls your mind, even easy English feels difficult and stressful.
But when your mind becomes calmer and more positive, your English often becomes smoother, more natural, and more confident automatically.
And today, we want to tell stories that show exactly that emotional transformation little by little through normal daily situations that may look small from the outside, but feel very meaningful inside the heart.
Maybe today you are listening while sitting alone in your room, feeling discouraged after making mistakes.
Maybe you are listening while traveling to school or work and wondering if your English will ever become good enough.
Or maybe you're simply tired because you studied for many hours but still feel shy during conversations.
If you feel any of those emotions today, please stay with us during this episode because we truly believe these stories will give you comfort, motivation, and hope again.
Because learning English is not a race against other people.
It is a personal journey that grows slowly through patience, courage, and daily practice.
And honestly, one small positive conversation can sometimes completely change your confidence for the entire week.
Yes, because motivation does not always come from big success or perfect speaking.
Sometimes motivation comes from tiny moments like understanding one difficult sentence, helping someone using English, ordering food successfully, or simply speaking without panicking for the first time.
Those moments may seem small to other people, but emotionally they can feel huge for learners who are trying hard every day.
And today, we want to celebrate those small victories together through these daily motivation stories.
We also want listeners to relax while learning because many people become too serious and too harsh toward themselves during language learning.
Which is why today's stories will also include funny misunderstandings, awkward situations, and embarrassing moments that later become warm memories instead of painful failures.
Because honestly, some of the funniest moments during language learning become the moments that teach us the most important lessons emotionally.
Very true. And we hope our listeners laugh together with us today instead of feeling afraid of mistakes all the time.
So, before we begin our first daily motivation story, we want everyone listening right now to stop worrying about perfect grammar for a moment and simply enjoy the experience of listening naturally.
You do not need to understand every single word perfectly.
Just relax, listen slowly, and allow your brain to learn naturally, little by little.
Because confidence grows through comfortable exposure, not through emotional pressure and self-criticism every single day.
And please remember this important truth before we continue.
Simple English can still create meaningful communication.
Simple English can still help people.
Simple English can still change your life slowly over time.
So, wherever you are listening from today, thank you for spending this time with us here on Empower English Channel.
And now, let's begin our first daily motivation story together.
Tom, today I want to start with a story that happened to me several months ago because, honestly, this small experience completely changed the way I looked at my English ability and also changed the way I spoke to myself emotionally afterward.
I already feel curious because sometimes the smallest moments become the most meaningful memories later in life.
Yes, exactly, because at first this looked like a completely ordinary day, nothing dramatic or special, but emotionally it became one of the most important learning experiences during my English journey.
Those kinds of stories are usually the most powerful because they feel very real and relatable for everyday learners.
Well, at that time, I was feeling very discouraged about my English because I had been studying almost every day for many months, but I still became nervous whenever I needed to speak with strangers in real-life situations.
That emotional frustration is extremely common because many learners feel confident while studying alone, but suddenly become shy during real conversations.
Yes, and honestly, I started doubting myself more and more every week because I kept comparing my English to people online who sounded fluent, smooth, and completely relaxed while speaking.
Social media can sometimes make learners forget that fluent speakers also spent years making mistakes and struggling quietly before becoming confident.
Exactly, but unfortunately at that time, my mindset had become very negative, and every small mistake suddenly felt huge and embarrassing inside my mind.
Which probably made speaking even more stressful emotionally.
It really did, because even before conversations started, I was already imagining failure inside my head.
That kind of fear creates pressure before you even speak the first sentence.
Yes, and one rainy afternoon, after finishing some shopping, I decided to stop at a small coffee shop near the station because, honestly, I felt emotionally tired and wanted a quiet place to relax for a while.
Rainy afternoons and coffee shops already sound like the beginning of an emotional story.
Honestly, it really felt like a movie scene in my head at that moment, because outside the windows, the rain was falling slowly while soft music played quietly inside the coffee shop.
That sounds very peaceful, actually.
Yes, and because the shop looked calm and comfortable, I suddenly thought, maybe this would be a good chance to practice ordering in English instead of staying trapped inside fear again.
That was actually a very brave decision because many people avoid opportunities when they feel nervous.
At first, I almost changed my mind completely because several customers were standing near the counter, and immediately my brain started creating negative thoughts like, what if I say something wrong? Or what if people laugh at my pronunciation?
Fear loves creating imaginary disasters before conversations even begin.
Exactly. But then I quietly reminded myself of something important that I had recently written inside my notebook.
What did you write?
Progress begins when fear stops controlling your decisions.
Wow, that is actually a very motivational sentence.
Thank you, because honestly, I wrote it during a difficult emotional moment when I realized my fear was becoming stronger than my desire to improve.
And remembering that sentence probably gave you a little courage in that moment.
Yes, so I slowly walked toward the counter while trying to breathe calmly and naturally instead of panicking internally like usual.
What happened next?
The worker smiled kindly and asked, "What would you like today?" And suddenly, my brain froze for 1 second, even though I practiced the sentence many times before walking to the counter.
That painful moment when your English disappears exactly when you need it most.
Exactly. And honestly, for 1 second, I almost wanted to point silently at the menu instead of speaking.
But thankfully, you did not surrender completely.
No, because after taking a small breath, I smiled nervously and said slowly, "Can I please have one hot caramel latte and one chocolate muffin?"
That sentence sounds very clear and natural, actually.
Yes, and the worker understood me immediately and smiled warmly while repeating my order kindly.
Which probably made you feel much more relaxed emotionally afterward.
It really did, because suddenly I realized the scary conversation inside my imagination was much worse than the real conversation itself.
That realization is extremely important for language learners because fear often exaggerates situations unrealistically.
Exactly. And then something unexpectedly funny happened while I was waiting for my drink near the counter.
Oh no, I can already feel an embarrassing moment approaching again.
Unfortunately, yes, because another worker nearby accidentally dropped several plastic straws onto the floor, and without thinking carefully, I wanted to help politely.
That sounds innocent enough so far.
Yes, but instead of saying, "Do you need help picking them up?" I accidentally said, "Do you need help picking yourself up?"
Emily, that sounds like the worker fell emotionally instead of dropping straws.
I know! And the moment those words left my mouth, I immediately realized something sounded very wrong.
What did the worker do?
At first, she looked confused for 1 second, then suddenly she started laughing kindly. And honestly, I became so embarrassed that I almost hid behind the coffee machine emotionally.
Honestly, though, that mistake is very funny in a warm and harmless way.
Thankfully, the worker was very kind and jokingly replied, "No worries, I still feel emotionally strong today."
Okay, that worker deserves an award for humor and kindness.
Yes, and surprisingly, instead of feeling terrible afterward, I suddenly started laughing too, and the whole situation became light, funny, and comfortable instead of stressful.
Which means your emotional reaction changed compared to before.
Exactly, because usually after making mistakes, I would feel ashamed for hours. But this time, I realized something important while sitting with my coffee afterward.
What realization did you have?
I realized that people usually care much more about kindness, energy, and communication than perfect grammar during real conversations.
That is such an important lesson for beginners who constantly pressure themselves emotionally.
Yes, because after relaxing more, I even started having a short conversation with another customer sitting near me who noticed my English practice.
Really? What did you talk about?
She asked me if I was studying English, and when I said yes, she smiled warmly and told me that she also struggled with language learning before.
That must have made you feel less alone emotionally.
It really did, because suddenly I understood that language learning struggles are universal and very human.
Exactly. Even confident people once felt nervous and embarrassed too.
And before leaving the coffee shop, that same customer told me something I still remember clearly today.
What did she say?
She smiled and said, "Confidence grows from conversations, not from waiting silently."
Wow, that sentence feels incredibly powerful and motivating.
Yes, and honestly, after hearing those words, something inside my mindset slowly changed permanently.
In what way?
I stopped waiting for perfect confidence before speaking English and started understanding that confidence actually grows naturally through imperfect conversations, funny mistakes, awkward moments, and repeated practice little by little every day.
That mindset change can completely transform someone's English journey emotionally.
Yes, because after that coffee shop experience, I became much more willing to practice speaking in daily situations instead of avoiding every opportunity out of fear.
Which means one small rainy afternoon conversation quietly changed your confidence and motivation.
Exactly. And honestly, that experience taught me something I hope every listener remembers today.
What lesson do you want listeners to remember?
I want them to remember that small conversations matter much more than they realize, because one tiny moment of courage today can slowly become the beginning of a much stronger and happier version of yourself tomorrow.
Emily, after hearing your coffee shop story, I suddenly remembered one of the most stressful and embarrassing experiences from my own English journey. And honestly, at that time, I thought it was a complete disaster. But later, it became one of the biggest turning points in my confidence and motivation.
Those kinds of experiences are very powerful because sometimes the moments we hate the most at first later become the moments that help us grow the most emotionally.
Exactly, because at that time I could not see anything positive about the situation at all. And honestly, I went home that day feeling deeply embarrassed and emotionally exhausted.
Oh no, now I really want to know what happened.
Well, this happened when I was still a university student, and one of my teachers suddenly announced that every student needed to give a short presentation in English in front of the entire class the following week.
That already sounds terrifying for shy English learners.
Terrifying is honestly too soft of a word, because the moment I heard the word presentation, my soul almost left my body emotionally.
I think many listeners understand that exact feeling very clearly.
Especially because my class had several students who spoke English very confidently already, so immediately my brain started comparing myself to them in a very negative and unhealthy way.
Comparison really destroys confidence quickly if we are not careful.
Yes, and for the entire week before the presentation, I became extremely nervous every single day while preparing my speech.
What was your presentation topic?
My topic was supposed to be the importance of healthy habits, which honestly sounded simple enough when I practiced alone in my room quietly at night.
But things usually feel very different when real people suddenly start watching you.
Exactly, because while practicing alone, I sounded calm and confident, but the moment presentation day arrived and I stood in front of the classroom, my brain suddenly transformed into mashed potatoes emotionally.
That is honestly one of the funniest and most accurate descriptions of panic I have ever heard.
Thank you, because truly I could feel every English word inside my mind running away in different directions like frightened chickens.
Oh no, poor Tom standing alone in front of the class while his vocabulary escaped.
Exactly, and honestly, the classroom suddenly felt much hotter, brighter, and scarier than usual, while everyone quietly looked toward me, waiting for the presentation to begin.
That silence before speaking can feel incredibly intense emotionally.
It really did, and when I finally opened my mouth to start speaking, I accidentally said, "Today I will talk about healthy rabbits instead of healthy habits."
Healthy rabbits are also important, Tom.
Apparently, my brain decided animals were more interesting than lifestyle advice that day.
What did the class do after hearing that?
First, there was 1 second of confused silence, and then suddenly several students started laughing loudly while I stood there dying internally.
Oh no, that must have felt painful emotionally at the time.
Honestly, yes, because I immediately felt my face becoming extremely hot with embarrassment, and for a few seconds I seriously considered pretending to faint dramatically just to escape the situation.
That would definitely create the most memorable English presentation in school history.
Honestly, it almost happened naturally because my legs already felt emotionally weak from panic.
So what did you do next?
At first, I completely froze and forgot the next sentence of my presentation because my mind became trapped inside embarrassment and self-consciousness.
That reaction is very normal during stressful public speaking situations.
Yes, and unfortunately, the more nervous I became, the more mistakes I started making while speaking.
What kind of mistakes?
At one point, I wanted to say, exercise improves your energy, but instead I accidentally said, exercise destroys. Exactly, and honestly, the classroom suddenly felt much hotter, brighter, and scarier than usual, while everyone quietly looked toward me, waiting for the presentation to begin.
That silence before speaking can feel incredibly intense emotionally.
It really did, and when I finally opened my mouth to start speaking, I accidentally said, "Today I will talk about healthy rabbits instead of healthy habits."
Healthy rabbits are also important, Tom.
Apparently, my brain decided animals were more interesting than lifestyle advice that day.
What did the class do after hearing that?
First, there was 1 second of confused silence, and then suddenly several students started laughing loudly while I stood there dying internally.
Oh no, that must have felt painful emotionally at the time.
Honestly, yes, because I immediately felt my face becoming extremely hot with embarrassment, and for a few seconds I seriously considered pretending to faint dramatically just to escape the situation.
That would definitely create the most memorable English presentation in school history.
Honestly, it almost happened naturally because my legs already felt emotionally weak from panic.
So what did you do next?
At first, I completely froze and forgot the next sentence of my presentation because my mind became trapped inside embarrassment and self-consciousness.
That reaction is very normal during stressful public speaking situations.
Yes, and unfortunately, the more nervous I became, the more mistakes I started making while speaking.
What kind of mistakes?
At one point, I wanted to say, exercise improves your energy, but instead I accidentally said, exercise destroys your energy.
Suddenly your presentation became dangerous health advice.
Exactly, and honestly, even I started hearing my own mistakes clearly while speaking, which made me panic even more emotionally.
That emotional spiral happens when people focus too much on mistakes instead of communication.
Yes, and finally, after another awkward sentence, I stopped speaking completely and looked down at my paper, feeling defeated and ashamed.
That sounds like a very emotional moment.
It really was, because inside my head, I kept thinking, everyone probably thinks my English is terrible.
But sometimes our minds imagine much harsher judgment than reality.
Exactly, and then something unexpected happened that changed the entire atmosphere completely.
What happened?
One student sitting near the front suddenly smiled warmly and said, "It's okay, just continue slowly."
Oh, that is actually very kind and encouraging.
Yes, and then another student nodded supportively, and suddenly I realized people were not waiting for me to fail.
They simply wanted you to continue and succeed.
Exactly, and honestly, that small moment of kindness changed my emotional energy immediately.
Because support can calm fear surprisingly quickly.
Yes, so I took a deep breath, relaxed my shoulders slightly, and decided to stop trying to sound perfect.
And what happened after that?
I started speaking more slowly, more naturally, and with simpler sentences instead of complicated ones I memorized nervously before class.
Which probably made your communication much clearer.
Exactly. And suddenly I noticed something surprising.
What surprised you?
The more relaxed I became emotionally, the better my English started sounding naturally.
That is such an important lesson for language learners.
Yes, because confidence and calmness affect communication much more than people realize.
So, how did the presentation end?
Surprisingly well, actually. Because after relaxing, I even added one small joke near the ending and several classmates laughed warmly.
Really? What joke did you make?
I smiled awkwardly and said, "Today I accidentally taught everyone about healthy rabbits instead of healthy habits, but maybe both are important for a happy life."
Honestly, that is adorable.
Thankfully, everyone laughed kindly, including the teacher, and suddenly the classroom felt warm and supportive instead of terrifying.
That emotional transformation is beautiful, actually.
Yes, because I walked into the classroom believing mistakes would destroy me, but I walked out understanding that mistakes could actually create connection, humor, and growth.
Wow, that is a very powerful realization.
And honestly, after that experience, my fear of speaking English publicly became much smaller, little by little.
Because you survived the embarrassing moment and realized life continued normally afterward.
Exactly. And I also learned something extremely important emotionally that day.
What lesson did you learn?
I learned that people often remember your energy, honesty, and courage much longer than your grammar mistakes.
That sentence feels deeply comforting for beginners who are afraid of embarrassment.
Because honestly, most people are kinder and more understanding than our fears imagine inside our minds.
Dear listeners, if you ever experience embarrassing moments while speaking English publicly, please remember that one mistake cannot define your ability, your intelligence, or your future progress.
Sometimes your most embarrassing moments later become your funniest memories and your strongest motivation to continue growing confidently.
Tom, your presentation story reminds me of one night that I almost completely gave up learning English. And honestly, when I think about that moment now, it still feels emotional because I was mentally and emotionally exhausted at that time.
I think many listeners will deeply understand that feeling because almost every learner experiences moments where they feel tired, discouraged, and emotionally stuck during their journey.
Yes, because language learning is not only about studying vocabulary and grammar, it is also an emotional journey filled with fear, doubt, hope, frustration, and small moments of courage.
That is very true. And sometimes emotional exhaustion becomes heavier than the studying itself.
Exactly. And at that time, I had been practicing English every single day for many months. But emotionally, I felt like my progress was too slow compared to the effort I was giving.
That feeling can become very painful because learners often expect progress to happen faster than reality.
Yes, and one evening after making many speaking mistakes during an online conversation practice, I suddenly became extremely frustrated and disappointed with myself emotionally.
What happened during the conversation practice?
Honestly, the mistakes themselves were not even very serious, but because my confidence was already weak, every small mistake felt emotionally huge inside my mind.
Negative thinking can magnify tiny mistakes until they feel much bigger than reality.
Exactly. And after finishing the conversation, I closed my laptop, sat quietly on my bed, and honestly started wondering if maybe English was simply too difficult for me.
That sounds like a very lonely emotional moment.
It really was, because my room was completely quiet. The lights felt dim, and I remember staring at my notebook full of English vocabulary while feeling emotionally empty and discouraged.
What thoughts were running through your mind?
I kept thinking things like, maybe I am not talented enough, or maybe other people improve faster because they are smarter than me.
Comparison and self-criticism together can become emotionally very dangerous.
Yes, and honestly, for almost 1 hour, I seriously considered quitting English practice completely because I felt emotionally exhausted from trying so hard every day.
Wow, that must have been one of the lowest emotional moments in your learning journey.
It really was. And then something very small but meaningful happened unexpectedly.
What happened?
Honestly, while cleaning my desk sadly, I found an old notebook from the beginning of my English journey, and inside it, I saw some of the first English sentences I ever wrote years ago.
Oh, wow. That must have created a very emotional comparison.
Exactly, because when I looked carefully at those old sentences, I suddenly realized how much my English had actually improved over time without me noticing properly.
That realization probably shocked you emotionally.
It really did, because suddenly I saw clear proof that progress had been happening quietly the entire time, even though I kept focusing only on my mistakes and weaknesses.
That is such an important lesson for learners.
Yes, because sometimes we become so obsessed with what we still cannot do that we completely ignore how far we already came.
That is very true emotionally and psychologically.
And while reading those old pages, I suddenly started laughing because some of my early English sentences were honestly very funny.
Really? Please share one.
One sentence said, "I very enjoy potato because potato understand me emotionally."
Honestly, that potato sounds like an incredible friend.
Apparently, past Emily believed potatoes provided emotional support during difficult times.
To be fair, potatoes are comforting emotionally.
Yes, but reading those funny mistakes suddenly changed my sadness into warmth and motivation.
Because you could finally see your growth clearly.
Exactly. And then I realized something very important that night.
What realization changed your mindset?
I realized that progress is often invisible while it is happening slowly day by day, but when you look back after months or years, the improvement becomes very clear.
Wow, that is honestly a very beautiful and motivating lesson.
And after calming down emotionally, I decided something important before sleeping that night.
What decision did you make?
I decided I would stop demanding perfection from myself every single day and instead focus on steady growth, patience, and consistency.
That sounds like the beginning of a much healthier emotional relationship with learning English.
Yes, because I finally understood that learning a language is not about becoming perfect quickly.
It is about becoming slightly stronger little by little every day.
Exactly. And honestly, after changing my mindset, learning English slowly became more enjoyable and less emotionally painful.
Dear listeners, if you ever feel tired or discouraged during your learning journey, please remember that slow progress is still real progress.
And one difficult emotional day does not erase all the hard work and growth you already achieved before.
Sometimes the strongest learners are simply the people who continue practicing gently even after difficult days emotionally.
As we slowly come to the end of today's long conversation together, we want everyone listening right now to stop for a quiet moment and truly think about your own English journey honestly and kindly inside your heart.
Because many learners spend so much time criticizing themselves emotionally that they forget to appreciate their own courage, effort, persistence, and growth that has slowly been building day after day.
Maybe your English still feels simple sometimes.
Maybe you still feel shy during conversations.
Maybe you still make grammar mistakes or forget vocabulary unexpectedly.
But please remember something very important before ending today's episode.
Every confident English speaker you admire today once struggled with simple sentences too.
Every fluent speaker once felt nervous, embarrassed, confused, and afraid, just like you.
The difference is simply that they continued practicing little by little instead of giving up completely during difficult emotional moments.
And honestly, we truly believe you can continue too.
Because learning English is not about becoming perfect overnight.
It is about growing slowly through small conversations, funny mistakes, emotional experiences, and daily motivation, little by little over time.
Sometimes one encouraging sentence can change your confidence for an entire week.
Sometimes one small successful conversation can completely change the way you see yourself emotionally.
And sometimes one difficult day can secretly teach you the most important lesson for future growth.
So please do not hate yourself for making mistakes while learning.
Mistakes are not proof of failure.
They are proof that you are bravely trying something difficult and meaningful.
And honestly, trying imperfectly is much more powerful than staying silent forever because of fear.
So tomorrow, please try speaking one simple English sentence again.
Even if your pronunciation shakes slightly.
Even if your grammar is not perfect yet.
Even if you still feel nervous inside.
Because confidence grows through action, not through waiting silently for perfect feelings.
And please remember this deeply inside your heart.
Your English journey matters.
Your effort matters.
Your voice matters too.
Thank you so much for spending this long, emotional conversation with us today here on Talkmaster English Channel.
We truly hope these daily motivation stories gave you comfort, hope, courage, and inspiration for your own English journey.
Continue learning slowly.
Continue speaking bravely.
Continue smiling after mistakes.
Continue believing that your English can improve naturally, little by little, every single day.
Because one day, without even realizing it, you will suddenly look back and understand how far you have already come.
And that moment will feel beautiful.
Goodbye, everyone.
Stay healthy, stay hopeful, and keep practicing.
We will see you again very soon with more warm conversations and motivation stories together.
Until then,
Learn slowly.
speak confidently.
And never stop believing in yourself.
Bye, everyone.
See you soon.